Welcome back to RC with Adam. My name is Adam. In this video, what we're going to do is we're going to go through Betaflight like you've never heard of Betaflight before, because Betaflight can be confusing. Like I just spent like half an hour trying to figure out how to update to the latest version for my Mac, and if you also need to figure out how, let me know, and I will try and make a tutorial video. It's like super simple, sort of. But like you have to enter this stuff in the command line thing, and like I've never done that before on my Mac, and I'm like, what? I don't know. And it wasn't working, and now it was. Anyway, that's my point. It can be so overwhelming when you're first getting started with this. So what we're going to do is basically in this video, hopefully by the end, you will know what you don't know. So I'm not going to try and tell you how to do all of the things that we cover, because there's like a lot of content there. If you want to know a lot more in-depth stuff about Betaflight, go over to Joshua Bardwell's channel, because he's like the Betaflight guy. And there are other channels and videos that are helpful as well. But in this video, what we're going to do is I'm going to walk you through, basically give you a tour and tell you where all of the important stuff are, important stuff is, and where to find stuff. You know, like if you're giving somebody a tour of your house, you're like, this is your bedroom, this is, you know, the bathroom, this is where you eat food, so that sort of thing. Okay, so let's start at the very beginning here. So Betaflight, wait, stop, let's back up. Start at the very beginning here. Okay, this is a quadcopter, so you probably know that because you're watching this video. Inside this quadcopter is something called a flight controller. The flight controller is basically a little computer, and it's like a little microchip type deal thing, circuit board. It's a little computer, and it controls all of the settings and all of the motors. Essentially, it's the brain of the quadcopter. Okay, and so the way that we change all the settings on this little tiny computer inside the quadcopter is we connect it to our computer with a micro USB cable, and there's a micro USB port on here, and on the computer, we use a configurator called Betaflight, and that is an application that you download from the internet. The internet is, no, I'm just kidding. You probably know what the internet is. So you download this, and you can probably I would just search like Betaflight configurator latest release, and that's probably what you'll get. Right now we're on 10.6.0. You need to make sure you get the right version for your computer. And then specifically, if you have a Mac, there are some special things that you have to do with the latest version, because of the latest version of Mac, which currently is Catalina, Mac OS. Anyway, so pick whichever version is for your computer, and then you download that, and then do whatever you need to get it running. Once you get it running, plug in your quadcopter like we have right here, and then you're going to open up Betaflight. And so here we are on the main page of Betaflight. So the very first thing, like there's tons of stuff. So the very first thing here is you're going to notice we have right on the front, it says latest CP210X drivers, STM USB VCP drivers. So those are drivers that you might need to actually get your quadcopter flight controller to talk to your computer. And if you don't know what a driver is basically just, think of it like a little tool, like a screwdriver. It's a little thing that you download that makes your computer be able to talk to other types of microchips, basically. So over here on the left-hand side, the most important thing is the firmware flasher. So firmware flashing. So flashing the firmware just means like we're updating the firmware. So here, let's see, here's where it would be. So you would select the flight controller board. So it should say somewhere on your flight controller board where it is, or what kind it is. And I just realized I'm kind of getting too in depth here a little bit. But basically, you want to keep your firmware up to date. And so in some cases, to set up your quadcopter, you might have to update the firmware. And this is where you would do it, the firmware flasher. Okay, so before I get more in depth, so now what I'm going to do is once everything is working right. Oh, actually, there's a button right there. Look at that, firmware, update firmware. You can do it from right there. I hadn't noticed that before. Okay, so now once we, if we needed to update the firmware, we can do that. If we needed the drivers, we can get those right there. Joshua Bardwell has some great videos on how to install drivers to actually get your quadcopter to talk to your computer. I think on the Mac you don't need those. Anyway, okay. So now let's actually connect our quadcopter to Betaflight. Let's see, is this going to connect? Okay, it's not connecting. So we need to, I think we need to select a different, port. Is that the right one? No, it's not. All right, so that's not working. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to disconnect the USB cable and plug the USB cable back into the quadcopter. There we go. And let's see if it's going to work. See, that's the other thing that's important to know about Betaflight is it's very finicky. There's a lot of just like different stuff. Let me unplug this little bar thing I have on my laptop, plug it back in. There's a lot of different types of issues that you could potentially have, and that can be why it's so frustrating. And that's part of why I'm making this video, because I want you to be aware of all of that stuff. So, okay, so this is like a perfect example right here, because usually this works and it's not working. It looks like it's not recognizing my quadcopter. Let's see if it'll plug into the Tiny Hawk. We're just going to go with the Tiny Hawk. So we're in the main screen of Betaflight once we actually connect our quadcopter. One of the main things right away, let me just say, this little button up here, the Enable Expert Mode, you can just go ahead and click that if you want, because it's going to give you more options here on this left-hand sidebar. And some of those options you might want to use, but like if you're searching for something and you're like, where is it? I can't find it. It's because you need to enable expert mode. So first thing, we have the setup page right here. You can calibrate the accelerometer, and that basically is like, you can see actually I'm moving around the quadcopter here and it's showing up on this little image of the quadcopter. Ooh, look at that. And so if you were in auto level mode and you were flying like sideways, it could be because you need to recalibrate your accelerometer. So you'd put your quadcopter on a level surface so that you're like, okay, this is level, and then you'd hit that calibrate accelerometer, and then it would be like, okay, cool, that is the new level. Okay, so that's one thing you can do there. In the ports tab, this is where you're going to set up like your receiver particularly, and other stuff that you have connected to the flight controller board. So most importantly, here you have UART, so USB, VCP, don't mess with that. That's like how your quadcopter talks with the USB port thing, so you can connect it to your computer. Don't worry about that. What you may need to mess with is the UART, or the UART 1, UART 2. Some flight controllers have more. And so what that is, oh gosh, what does that stand for? Universal. Let me know in the comments what that stands for. I can't remember right now. Doesn't matter. The most important thing is that you see here it says serial RX. So that means your receiver. The serial, it means it's like digital, let's just say. That's your receiver. So basically, when you have a receiver connected to one of your flight controllers, if on the flight controller it'll probably say like RX, and that's where you're going to select that little button right there to enable that particular pad on the flight controller for your receiver. And as I'm saying this, I feel like it's becoming more complicated as I'm saying it, but I don't know. Let me know if this is helping you at all. And then you have other things like telemetry output, sensor output, peripherals, and right here we have the VTX TBS smart audio. So we have smart audio, and smart audio basically just means that you can control the video transmitter with VTX, video transmitter settings, through your stick commands on the OSD, which is the on-screen display. And the stick commands means you can use your transmitter to actually access basically change settings on the quadcopter without having to go into Betaflight. Man, it's like, see, and then you learn all this stuff and you don't even think about it. And then that's why I feel bad for like beginners like you and like how I used to be, where people are saying all these things and you don't even have a clue. Like, is this an actual physical thing, or is this just like a virtual thing, or is like, can I see it? Can I change it? Is it on Betaflight? Where is it? So, oh man. Wow. Okay. Configuration. We got a lot of stuff in configuration. You got your ESC motor stuff. If you need to change the different type of ESC protocol, you do that there. Motor stop. This is actually a big one, but we'll talk more in depth about this in another video I'm going to do that's like helpful troubleshooting stuff. But you got your motor stop, which means the motors don't spin even when the quadcopter is armed, which is usually a no-no. You want them to start spinning so you know it's armed. All kinds of stuff there. The mixer, the quad configuration, how your motors are, which way your motors are spinning. That's very, very important. Board and sensor alignment. You can change the board if it is not lined up like with the arrow of the flight controller board, how it's supposed to be. System configuration stuff. Usually you don't really have to mess with that much. Accelerometer trim. Arming. Arming is a big one. Arming, to arm the quad, that means to turn it on to make it ready for flight. You probably always want to set this to 180 because that means it will arm at any angle. So if your quadcopter is tilted and it's not arming and you're like, what is going on? That could be that you need to set that to 180 degrees, which disables the arm area. It allows you to arm at any angle. So you could be upside down and still arm your quadcopter, which is good if you get stuck in a tree or something. Or you want to do flip over after crash, which means you can just reverse the motors and then flip yourself over. Receiver, this is the most important one right here. This is where you're going to set up your receiver. You're going to pick the type of receiver, serial, PPM, PWM. That's the main thing. And then this type is going to depend mainly like on the brand of receiver. So like right now I'm using iBus because I'm using FlySky, but it will vary. So depending on what you have. Some other stuff here, other features, other things you can turn on all the time. Air mode, OSD, anti-gravity, dynamic filter. I just have these turned on all the time. D-shot beacon configuration, beeper configuration, what you want your quadcopter to beep for, all the different reasons why it might beep. That's it for the configuration. Power and battery. I don't really mess with this very much. Partially because I don't know how. Also, it's kind of a pain. But just basically, on your on-screen display, the little things on your FPV display in your goggles, the voltage is usually one of the things that you have. And so, if the voltage is incorrect for some reason, you need to like adjust it, then this is where you would do that. Fail safe. Fail safe is when your quadcopter loses connection with your transmitter. What's your quadcopter going to do? That's where you decide this right here. Most of the time, after like a very short period of time, like what is this? Is that 0.4 seconds? Or failsafe low throttle delay? Is that 1 second? I think it's 1 second. Anyway, after like a second, it's just going to drop out of the sky. Usually, that's kind of best. Most of the time, and that's it for failsafe, pretty much. Oops, go back. Failsafe. Oh no. Okay, this happens sometimes too. Don't worry. We're just going to disconnect. Now we're going to connect back up. Okay. I don't know why it does that. It's like it crashes or something. So fail safe. There's other things you can do, but don't worry about that. If you're a beginner, just make sure that you have a fail safe. So you want to test your fail safe without propellers. Okay, let's move on to PID tuning. Now, this is the PID tuning tab. PID is an acronym. It stands for, what does it stand for? It stands for proportional, integral, and derivative. To be honest with you, I'm still trying to figure out what those things practically mean and practically how to change them. Basically, it controls some of the flight characteristics of your quadcopter, but it's all like computery inside the machine, matrixy kind of stuff. What is really going to matter to you, because these things work, they got it pretty well figured out. So if you're a beginner, don't even worry about it. So what will matter is the rate profile settings right here. So this is where you're going to change your rates, your expo, your throttle, your throttle curve. I haven't done anything to the throttle curve right here. And again, I'm not going to go into detail, even though I really want to, about all these different things, but this is where you're going to do it. And let's see. And they just kind of changed the layout on this, on the latest update, which I'm not sure if I like yet. I haven't messed with it too much. So in any case, this is where you're going to change your stuff right here. This is going to be the most important stuff. And if you want to learn more about what those mean, look up a video by someone else or leave a comment and tell me that you'd like to see a how-to video on rates, because I'm going to do one anyway eventually, but it'd be nice to know that you want one. Here we go. Receiver tab. The receiver is very important because this is going to, all these bars right here, very colorful, which is nice. These correspond to your stick controls, so the transmitter stick controls. So you will be able to see whether your transmitter is actually talking to your quadcopter or not. You may need to connect a battery to your quadcopter in order to actually get your receiver to turn on if your receiver is not powered from the USB cable. So make sure you take your propellers off if you need to do that, because you don't want something crazy happening. In any case, this is where you're going to change stuff. This is where you're going to check to make sure your channels are correct, your transmitter's working, your channel map, that's important, your RSSI right there, your RC deadband, other stuff like that. And then you can also preview it right here in this window with your transmitter and see how quickly it responds. If your computer's pretty slow, the preview might not work very well and it'll be all like choppy. So if that's the case, don't worry too much. All right, let's go to the modes tab. So in the modes tab, this one's fun. You really have to have your transmitter working in order to really like do the, I mean, you don't have to, but like it really helps a lot to have the modes, to have your transmitter working in order to configure the modes. Because what these are, you have all these different modes right here in these different little boxes, or kind of rows, I guess. All these different modes, and I only use like some of them. Most importantly, you're going to want your arm mode right here. So your arm switch on your transmitter, you're going to configure that here. Now these little yellow hash marks right there, and I can't move them because I don't have a transmitter hooked up, but they will move when you move a switch. And so they'll go from, say, like 1,000 to, I think, 2,000, or 1,000, I think 1,500 and 2,000, something like that, if it's a 3-position switch. And so what you do is you drag these little yellow bars to where that little yellow hash mark is, and then that means that it's going to be active. Whatever the mode is, that's where it's going to be active when your switch is in that position to make the yellow hash mark go under the yellow bar. And that is how that works. And by the way, all of these tabs and everything, you want to make sure that you click save before you leave the tab, otherwise it won't save. So anything you do, click save. There you go. Let's hide these unused modes just to show you what I typically set up. I typically set up an arming mode, an angle mode, which is auto level, a beeper, so I can find my quadcopter, flip over after crash. I don't use that too often, but just in case I need it. And acro trainer, I don't actually usually set that up, but I'm going to be experimenting with that and making a video for you guys, because I think that acro trainer is actually super awesome. I kind of wish I had acro trainer when I was getting started. So we'll be playing around with that. So that's it for the modes tab, but most importantly is the arming. You got to set up an arming switch. If your quadcopter is doing nothing or not working, you may not have the arm switch set up. Okay, cool. So let's go over to, let's see, adjustment. Never use that. Don't even know what it's for, to be totally honest with you. Servos, never use that. I don't ever use that. Motors, use this sometimes. So with the motors, one thing is you do get your little graph here of the, what is this? Is it like the gyro? I don't know. It moves. It looks cool. I don't really use that a whole lot. But what I do use is you have these motors right here. Usually it's going to be 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then you also have this nice little diagram, 1, 2, 3, 4, to show you which motors are where. This can be really useful if you're building your own quadcopter or you're trying to troubleshoot And what you can do is right here you say, I understand all the risks. I will chop my fingers off if I have to. Not really, just kidding. Take your propellers off. And if you have a battery connected to your quadcopter, you can actually control all of the motors using this master switch right here. So you can raise and lower the throttle on all of the motors. And that can be useful because then, you know, you can see if one motor is like way off, then there's probably something wrong with that. But again, remove all your propellers when you are doing this because it could get bad. Like things could get chopped up. Like these blades will cut you depending on what kind of blade it is. Anyway, that's the motors. So if you need to do troubleshooting, that's probably where you're going to go. All right, OSD. So the OSD on-screen display, that is the overlay like a fighter pilot, except maybe a little less high-tech. And that's all these guys right here. So you've got your voltage, your RSSI, your receiver signal strength indicator. You got your flight time, anything you want. Like all these different things. I mean, if they're like enabled, you can have a ton of different stuff. Which is like you could probably have so much stuff you couldn't even fly. That would be kind of funny, actually. So in any case, the way you do that is you like select which ones you want, and then you can kind of position them on the screen and change them around. And like I like to put my the name of the quadcopter so that way I can tell which one it was. So that's all cool. And then let's see, sensors. Here's where you can really tell and make sure all the sensors on the board are working. I'm not super familiar with this stuff because I don't have to use it too often, but this could be helpful if your quadcopter is behaving weirdly and you're like, what's going on? And you need to test and make sure that, say, your accelerometer is working. So like that's that one down there, that's your accelerometer. And so you can be like, oh yeah, okay, it's I'm getting some results from it. So if you weren't getting any results from it, then something would probably be wrong. Tethered logging. Never done this before in my life. But I think it's probably where you have a tether and you probably your quadcopter's connected to the computer and you are logging the stuff. That's probably what it is. I guess you could click on that wiki thing to find out, but I'm not going to do that right now. Now, Blackbox. I have used Blackbox before. Blackbox, that just means that there's a little thing. I think you have to make sure your flight controller like has the ability to do this, but Blackbox logging just means that your quadcopter is going to save all of the flight data from a flight, and you can then actually you can use like an online thing. I think it's like Blackbox Viewer or something. I've used that before, and it will give you all of like your information. It'll even show you like a graphical or like a representation, like a 3D representation image of your quadcopter and like which motors are spinning up and the angle that it's tilting. And this can be very, very useful, as well as stick positions. It can be very useful for troubleshooting. Absolutely. Remember that. Now, let's go to the CLI command, because this is where you can actually do everything that you can click with buttons and stuff on Betaflight right here in the CLI command by typing in the correct keywords and commands and everything. By the way, CLI stands for Command Line Interface, and I did not know that for a very long time. So like you can type in different stuff. It's almost like magic or like some sort of like secret code, like ooh. But for example, probably one of the most useful things would be like if you type dump. What? Look at all this stuff. So this will give you. Let's see, building autocomplete cache done, dump. So this will actually give you all of the information, name, TinyHawk S, all of this different stuff, all the like what, resource, timer, DMA, servo, feature, beeper, LED, blah, so much stuff. This is like everything. This is all of your settings. This is your how you have your quadcopter set up. Now this can be really helpful because what you can do is you can do copy to clip, or you could say save to file or copy to clipboard, and then you could actually like rebuild your whole, like you could enter all this information into this text box right here, and then you could like have all of the same settings. I guess you'd have to make sure you had the right firmware though, that there wasn't any issue like if you had a newer version of the firmware and it was not everything was compatible, something like that. Anyway, just a fun fact there. And anytime you type something in here, you want to make sure that you type save. So like save like that, and then it will actually kick you off of the it'll kick your quad out of Betaflight, so you have to reconnect when you do that. But you want to make sure you click save, because if you don't click save, well then everything in there won't matter. Wow. Okay, that was a lot of stuff. I hope that made sense. If it did, let me know. And let me know if you have questions about other things, because I am sure that you do. And if I missed something, which I'm sure I did, please let me know also, because I will be making more videos about Betaflight, because now I finally I'm going to have some more time to do that, and I really want to get more kind of into it and more practically based, because I don't have too many videos about Betaflight, and I know that can be a very confusing thing. So my goal is to break it down and try and simplify it and practicalify it for you. Thanks for joining me. Thanks for subscribing and liking this video. I appreciate you. I hope this was helpful for you in your quadcopter journey. I forgot what I was going to say. All right. Thanks for watching. I'll see you again very soon.